Our next fic is one that I wrote, but this is a little different than a lot of the stuff I've written because this is a tie-in fic for New Game Plus, which is the visual novel that several of us, including me and Bucky, who is the director of the project, are working on. And this is a fic that is basically bridging the gap between the end of Homestuck, Act 7, not the epilogues or Homestuck 2, and what happens in New Game Plus. So we're going to read two chapters of this because the way this is structured is every other chapter is the beta kids on Earth C, but the first chapter and every other chapter after is some original characters who are on Earth C after the kids have like set everything up and then left, but before they come back 5,000 years later. So it's like 40 years after Earthsea is kind of populated, and some stuff is happening, and it's going to feel like what the hell is going on, but you're not really supposed to know all the details. You're supposed to just pick it up from context. Like it will rapidly become clear why it's not particularly important what the details are. So I will.
Hi, Evan.
Hello. Welcome.
Sorry,
Welcome.
I want to say hi to Evan before we start.
You're good.
Oh, thank you. Hi.
We've got a few voice parts for this. I will do narration because I wrote it. We're going to need a voice for a woman named Lorelei, who appears in the first chapter. And we're going to need a John and a Jade for the second chapter.
Can I be John?
You absolutely can.
Can I be Jade?
You can. And we need someone to voice... Oh, and we need a Mike. Mike is a... So Lorelei is a software developer and sort of just like even-handed, pretty level-headed woman. And Mike is a real asshole who works as security for the settlement they're in.
I like the sound of Lorelei. I call dibs.
Okay, you're Lorelei.
I can be Mike.
We need Mike.
Oh, you
okay,
can be Mike.
We got a Mike. If we keep reading this, Mike is a real bastard.
The best type of character.
So anyway, this is At the Precipice of, which was written by me under a pseudonym, although AO3 makes that pretty transparent. This has tags for a few different things. It's Earthsea, Homestuck, post-canon, Earthsea, pre-return, that's before the kids get back to Earth, original characters. This is not epilogue and not Homestuck 2 compliant. Siblings, introspection, New Game Plus, that's our game. World building, post-suburb, Homestuck, post-suburban scrub, and depression. On an Earthsea the gods abandon, a woman makes her last stand. On an Earthsea the gods have yet to leave, a group of friends and allies make their final preparations. Chapter 1, The Cold and Lonely. Lorelei shivered in the cold, the bite of the wind cutting in through the prefab Skynet shelter that she'd hastily thrown up when she got there. It was technically supposed to include a fully functioning heater for cold weather operations, but like almost everything else that had Skynet attached to it, she was quickly realizing that there was some kind of horrid catch to everything. They'd find her, eventually. She'd known it when she stole the transport, thank God for the drone tech that even let her pilot the damn thing, and she knew it now even more keenly. She'd known it as she flew south, further and further down the coast and then out over the open water. She'd been over the water for so long, the endless miles sliding it by in a blue-green haze as she watched the fuel indicator like a hawk, waiting for the moment when it would tell her that she was exceeding the maximum distance for a safe return. The warning had come and gone, and she'd ignored it. Thousands of miles more, until she reached the ice-blasted remnants of the southernmost continent. There, in those frigid wastes, she would make her last stand. A last stand which, Lorelei reflected, had consisted of setting up a temporary shelter and Skynet terminal and plugging back into the intranet. She still didn't understand how the planetary network functioned exactly, but she knew enough about the functional details to be able to figure most things out. She'd managed to restore access permissions, at least, for herself and Joe. She wasn't sure why she'd bothered with the last part. She was alone, after all.
can't fucking do this.
Lorelei's voice was hoarse in her throat, still burning from the pepper spray they'd used.
We've got rights.
The head of security, a rough-looking man known only as Mike, shrugged and tightened the flexicuffs on her wrists.
Not my problem, Lore. You've done enough damage as it is.
What damage?
She couldn't believe this was happening. Yes, the settlement was new. Yes, they were the first generation out of the vats. Yes, everything was still being figured out, but they couldn't possibly be this oblivious to what was happening.
Mike, you know I'm right about this. It's not gonna last forever.
Man, this really isn't my problem.
Lorelei glanced over nervously at the form of Joe lying on the ground. She'd been right there by the door when they raided the server center. One of Mike's crew had hit her over the head with the end of a rifle, and she went down hard. Lorelei kept looking over at her, hoping for some sign of life, hoping that there was something that would let her know that she wasn't going to be alone in all this.
Don't worry about her,
Mike said. He hauled Lorelei to her feet by the wrists and patted her on the shoulder.
Medical check her out and all that. I already checked her pulse and she'll be fine. Just a little bit of a nap. Really. It wasn't anything personal.
She didn't respond. No matter what he said, it sure felt personal to her.
Alright, go talk to Alan.
Mike said quietly.
He's already pissed at you, so maybe don't say anything stupid. Okay?
Her mind reeled. Why was he taking her to see a systems tech? A network engineer that she'd been supervising up until he locked her and Joe out of the systems they were supposed to be working on. She'd always known that he was a petty bitch, but that had been more than she'd ever expected from him. It was taking forever for the fucking terminal to boot up in the cold. The Skynet tech was already sluggish, even under ideal circumstances, and freezing her ass off in a badly constructed shelter thousands of miles from home was hardly an ideal set of circumstances. Except it wasn't really home anymore, was it? Even if she wanted to go back, even if she could go back home without being killed on sight, Alan had made sure to salt the earth as far as her ever being able to put down roots there again. He'd burned away everything she'd worked so hard in 15 years to build up. Taken away everything she cared about. First group out of the fucking vats, and they were already repeating the sins of the old world. At least they had the old records available, for a while. It was nice to know exactly how badly they were fucking things up. After what felt like a small eternity, the computer finally finished its boot sequence and reconnected to the planetary intranet. She'd made sure to leave herself a few back doors into the system during her time as the admin, and she hadn't bothered to share that information with anyone else. Well, one other person, but that didn't matter anymore. Lorelei felt her heart starting to race. This was going to put her on their scope sooner rather than later. It would take them time to trace down the location of her terminal, especially given the remote location and steps she was taking to actively avoid them. But it would happen eventually. At minimum, she figured she had 12 hours it would take the Skynet transports to get to her. 12 hours was a long time, especially if you couldn't even sleep because of the damn cold. The back doors were all still there, all the little passages and virtual side streets that she'd put into place just in case that something ever happened. And it seemed as if just in case had come into full effect. After a few minutes, she was able to restore access to the systems and lock Alan's account out from access. It was, in actuality, only one small corner of the Skynet planetary intranet, but it was her small corner again. L. Smith, 6/12/43, 1:18 p.m.
I don't have a lot of time. They don't know where I am yet, but they will soon. Alan gave them access. The ones with all their fucking guns. They'll be back in. I'll figure this out. I have to figure this out.
She was going to do everything she could in that time. She didn't know if the Alternians had tapped into the network, wasn't sure whether or not the Carapacians that had left their settlement when things started to get bad were in contact with anyone. She wasn't sure about anything, really, other than at least one slice of the new world she'd been a part of was starting to burn. And fire had a way of catching. Chapter 2. On a Mountain in a New World. Jade Harley had been looking for her brother for hours. They'd been working on putting the final touches on the ectobiology chambers when he just kind of vanished. She wasn't going to admit it to anyone, but she'd had a brief moment of panic where she really thought that he was just kind of gone. She was going to go looking for him, and he was going to be consumed by some kind of narrative void, pulled into an unreality that would consume him utterly and leave nothing behind, not even his memory. She flew quickly, rushing along the tree line so close that the upper branches of the growing pines snapped at her heels. She flew up from the tree line, the world below rapidly becoming a wide expanse that seemed to stretch on forever on every side, a world of greenery and life and possibilities. After so long spent in the darkness of space, it felt good to be able to breathe the air again, even if she technically didn't need to. But even with the liberating feeling of flying through this world she was helping to build, she couldn't help but worry. Down below, everything seemed small, then too small, then so small that Jade felt herself starting to panic. She flew down lower until the tiny bottle brushes of the trees once again resolved themselves into something that was recognizably real and tangible and large, and she felt the spring of panic starting to subside. The worry for John, though, that didn't quiet so easily. As she slowly lit along the trees, sometimes dipping to brush the branches softly, she still worried. He'd seemed so despondent in the last few months, and even as she did everything in her power to distract herself with the joy of creation, John seemed wholly unwilling to do anything more than the barest amount required of him. It was ridiculous for her to worry about finding him in the first place, because she found him sitting on top of one of the nearby mountains, not even a 10-minute flight away. She recognized the brilliant blue of his god-tier outfit from the distance, a beacon against the gray and green and brown of the mountain, highlighted by the light of the late afternoon sun. She skimmed up and along the rocks, not wanting to stray too far above, just in case another panic attack was waiting up there for her. She sat down beside John softly, a respectful distance away, and cleared her throat softly. He heard her.
Oh,
He turned and looked at her over his shoulder.
oh, hey Jade, how's it going?
He tried to smile, but it had the look of someone who is forcing themselves to perform the motions that he thought a human was supposed to, rather than anything actually genuine or heartfelt.
It's going fine, John.
Jade walked over and sat down next to her brother, sweeping the tails of her own outfit away from her. She laughed softly.
You know, we could make some new outfits. Alchemize something a little more normal.
He shrugged. He didn't care.
Sure, I guess. I kind of got used to them, I guess. You know? How you just get used to stuff sometimes?
Sure.
She tried to smile, but seeing the look on John's face felt painfully forced.
What are you doing up here anyways?
Another shrug.
Not sure. Just felt like getting away for a little bit. Flew up here because...
He gestured to the sweeping vista that spanned below them, lit by the amber rays of a sun that was starting to just touch the horizon. A sun that was like their sun, but technically wasn't their capital S sun.
It's pretty.
Jade said quietly.
I like to get away from stuff too, sometimes. Especially when I've got things on my mind.
This time John laughed.
Is that why you're here? To ask me if I've got a lot on my mind? Jade, we've all got a lot on our minds. All the time.
It's just, John, we've been here for 6 months getting all this stuff ready, and you've just kind of been keeping to yourself. All the others have been working so hard on putting everything together to hand off to the Capricians, and you... I'm not saying you're not doing any work, but...
But you're saying I'm not doing any work.
John snapped at her, his voice tinged with a slightly hard edge of annoyance, verging on anger.
Jade, you throw yourself into whatever problems need to be solved every day. Then you run off and go God knows where for hours. Then you go sleep for a few hours and repeat the same fucking process. You're the last person who should be lecturing to me about healthy habits.
The response stung. Jade felt her ears folded down and her tail drooping on the ground behind her.
I mean, I'm just decompressing. There's nothing wrong with that, right?
Right.
John laughed in a way that didn't suggest he found any of this funny.
You're fine, right?
I'm fine.
Jade said. Suddenly, this felt far more personal than she was ready for, far more intimate in a way that she wasn't prepared for. She repeated it, because that made it more true.
I'm fine.
Sure. John did that
If you're
same laugh again, and Jade found herself flinching.
If you're fine, then I'm fine.
All right. Thank you. And that's...
That was
Good shit!
I call it poggers, and I was like, I just said poggers in the chat. I can't keep on saying poggers.
You're good.
Too late.
Also, if anyone liked that, please check out New Game Plus. That's hsnewgameplus.com or at hsnewgameplus on Twitter. We are going to be releasing a gameplay trailer very soon, possibly on an important Homestuck day. So we've been working very hard on the game. We've got a number of very talented writers and artists and musicians all working very hard on making this a reality. So we're plugging right along, but we're going to have some gameplay to show off to everyone. So definitely check that out. We try to keep everyone updated. We've been posting little quotes from all of the characters, the major characters, and we are going to be on our last character this Friday. So you can read those and probably guess who they're referring to if you recognize their text color or quirk, and that gives you a little bit of an idea of where all the characters are at as far as the start of the game.